I found that ugly diary years later, and there was my first and only entry. Dear Diary, Alexis is a Dear Diary, digital diary, sticky note, notebook, sketchbook, commonplace book, agenda, gay agenda, interstitial journal, shadow journal, bullet journal, day planner, just a blank doc, notes app, or that other app, personal wiki, digital garden, or garden board, cardboard. But will it fit in my analog bag? There are endless possibilities for how to collect your ideas, each one with the promise of being the best tool for self-exploration, psyche examination, life organization, creative cultivation, and most importantly, brain rot abstention. All noble and radical acts in a world of overstimulation, but they're all just tools. And tools can lure us in with the promise that this will fix everything. Then all of a sudden we're on a new path of overstimulation. Tips, tricks, techniques, habits, hacks, how-tos. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it enough? We're no longer using the tool's using us. And now who's the tool? So before cracking open another notebook, before buying more expensive pens, planners, and paper, before you even calligraphically practice the word gratitude, let's get clear on why we're doing any of this, so that the next time we abandon a tool, and we will, we aren't abandoning the reason why we started using it in the first place. I'm Zoe Popsicle, and I live at the intersection of creativity and organization. I love making shit up and getting things done. Let's go to the drawing board. Why are people so intrigued with capturing their ideas, feelings, thoughts, opinions, or collecting other people's ideas, scavenging research, hoarding images, making our little folders, squirreling and sorting all the information we discover? The fact that there are endless tools for doing just these kinds of tasks leads me to believe that a lot of people are on this quest and have been for time immemorial. But what quest is that? The quest of self-discovery, of course, or self-exploration, or introspection, living an examined life, or, my favorite, and often said with contempt, navel-gazing. It always makes me think of looking lovingly at a navel orange. Call this process whatever you want. They're all seeking the same thing: to know yourself. Ah, so noble, and yet so vague. I struggle with lofty concepts like this because while I'm totally bought in theory, they often feel too abstract to access in practice. So I've taken the liberty of distilling the process of self-discovery into a very simplistic equation for the sake of gaining access to doing it. Self-discovery is the process of examining our experiences and evaluating them. So simple, but not always so easy in a world filled with overstimulation and overwhelm. So many things are competing for our attention. I'm going to share some examples from my own life that illustrate how tools and techniques can either help or hinder our process of self-discovery. And we'll explore them through the lens of examining and evaluating. You should know I didn't consciously choose the examined life, not initially at least. I kind of fumbled my way here, and at no point would I have described it as being on the pursuit of self-discovery. That's really been a hindsight revelation. And I also didn't get here because I had exceptional guidance or any special talent for establishing good habits. I've abandoned many journals and notebooks over the years. Finishing things has evaded me my whole life. I was more of a scribbly sketchbook kid, not the kid who kept a fastidious notebook or diary, although I very much aspired to be. Actually, I was given a diary as a gift, but I didn't know what to do with it. Here, I found the exact one. It was this very girly book with a soft focus photo of teddy bears and roses, and it had a lock and key. I assumed if it had a lock, it was intended for ideas that should be locked up. But I was so aesthetically offended by it that I never used it. Or so I thought, because I found that ugly diary years later, and there was my first and only entry. Dear Diary, Alexis is a bitch. Now, while it may be amusing to examine this single piece of information, it might be difficult to make any useful evaluations of my broader 9-year-old experience. But I can easily draw some conclusions by evaluating the tool or process. Superficially, but not to be overlooked, if the tool gives you the ick, it might not be the tool for you. Presumably, this product was produced for girls my age, and these kind of diaries might have even been popular or on trend at the time, but I clearly didn't vibe with it. But the most important evaluation I can make 30 years later is if you don't have a good reason to use the tool, you won't. My next foray into life capturing was with agenda books in school. Every year we'd get a fresh one, and I loved them. Or I loved the idea of them. Teachers heavily promoted the idea that this organizational tool would be the cornerstone of your academic success. And while I probably started out the year strong, I never really got the hang of using them effectively to help with organizing schoolwork. I liked the idea of being organized, but I actually got more use out of the agenda as a tool for passing notes. I'd write accounts of what was happening in class, not the lesson, of course, but the thrilling drama of 13-year-olds. Then I'd swap my agenda with a friend who was documenting the same thing in another class. It was like a blog, but on paper and in a daytimer. My evaluation? Aspiring to use a tool for its potential benefits isn't enough to get those benefits. And what kind of tool you use is almost irrelevant if you have a compelling enough reason to capture the information. Does it make logical sense to write social commentary in a daytimer? Not really. Was it good enough to get the job done? Yup. And did it make me want to write more? You bet. Fast forward to high school, my biting teenage social commentary makes the leap from agenda books to actual Word docs. In this case, shifting to a more appropriate tool was motivated by necessity, not because I thought I should or because it promised to make my writing any better, but because I was highly motivated to organize, edit, and share my terrific insights. My friend Claire and I start our own zine, Taught Fat. We have articles, we have fake ads, bullshit interviews with B-list celebrities. Now the year's 2003 and social media doesn't exist yet, and blogging still is in its infancy, so our tool of choice? Print media. We print these things full color, 35 pages an issue, with page protectors fastened into plastic document folders. We gotta protect those pages because these things are gonna get passed around. And they do, to our loyal fan base. Our friends. You could say we were early 2000s micro-influencers of our very limited suburban high school world. My evaluation. Was print media the most efficient tool? I'm pretty sure we had to keep track of every single issue because there was only one of each. We had to figure out whose house they were at any given time and put them in mailboxes so we could collect them from different friends. So yeah, very poor efficiency score. They also used up all the colored ink in the family printers, so they weren't cost effective. But did printing these zines make them feel very special and very important? Absolutely. Not only that, but long term, it's made them some of the most cherished artifacts from my teenage years. It's very hard to hold a blog. The zine went on indefinite hiatus when we graduated and went on to higher education. I went off to art school, and enter the visual journal. It's just a sketchbook, rebranded to be more sophisticated. In several studio classes, keeping a visual journal was mandatory, and it was kind of a show your work situation. It wasn't as fancy-free as the sketchbooks I kept as a kid. We were instructed to take notes in them, identify what was working and not working, and really use them as a personal resource. I can vividly recall the visual journal that I kept in my first year drawing class. At the time, I was really into botanical illustrations, and I was collecting all this reference imagery from books in the library, like physically photocopying books and clipping out images to put in my visual journal. And I was also trying to learn how to draw in this style. And it was going okay. I was getting better, but I started to get really bored by the preciousness and perfection of this style. Because I wasn't just practicing technique, but also taking lots of notes alongside, I was able to have clarity on this revelation. While I loved looking at this style, recreating it didn't light me up. My evaluation? Being consistent will always help you develop your skills, but evaluating all your consistent work is what will help you evolve your own style. Physical media will always bring a quality to a project that digital media can't touch. Figuratively and literally, you can't touch your digital world. So perhaps we shouldn't think of physical tools or media as substandard or less effective. They have very real merits, and we should seriously consider the virtues when selecting capture tools. And I'm not saying digital media is bad or even that it's less real. It absolutely has strengths. After all, I'm not putting this message out as a one-woman performance in the town square. I wrote it on my laptop, recorded it on my phone, and chopped it up in editing software. Goodness knows I'm not advocating for a return to some idealized bygone era. We have phenomenal tools at our disposal. But the shiny new promises they offer can easily eclipse the objective of their use. I can type faster than I can think, which is exactly why I chose to use a physical notebook for personal journaling. When I write by hand, it forces me to slow down and examine what's going on in my head thoughtfully. I take time to understand myself instead of flailing wildly on the keyboard. You know, Alexis really was a bitch, and here's an exhaustive personal essay on why. I really built up my journaling practice starting in 2023. I'd already hit my stride with day planners back in the 20-teens, but at the end of 2022, I was going through some difficult stuff and I needed a tool to help me work through my thoughts. I figured I would kickstart a fresh journal on January 1st and try 100 days of journaling with prompts. I made it 2 weeks and gave up. At the beginning of February, I came back because I felt guilty for giving up on a commitment I had made to myself. Then I did it for another 2 weeks and dropped it again, this time for 2.5 months. In April, when I came back, I didn't come back because I felt guilty, but because I remembered that the whole point of me wanting to journal was to support my mental health, and I still had shit going on. My evaluation: adding this superfluous goal of 100 days with prompts actually distracted me so much that I forgot why I wanted to use journaling in the first place. When I did get back into it, because I still had a lot going on, I poured it all out on the page without prompts or check marks for days completed. I used it to work through what I was going through, and it was really useful. I didn't need some kind of accountability piece because the tool was effectively supporting the intended use. I used it almost every day until December 31st. It was the first time I had filled a personal journal front to back, and that alone felt like an accomplishment. I was really hopeful that I could keep up the habit in 2024. And then I reread the whole thing front to back. It took 4 hours. I had to stop at one point and grab a highlighter because there were so many insights pouring out. Things I had completely forgotten about made vivid again, reminding me of what was really happening in my day-to-day. Patterns emerged, me in February, May, June, October, yelling at me from the page, please, 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 if you're feeling like shit, go exercise. It helps so much. I should mention that I've been drinking the health data Kool-Aid since the late 2000s, and I've collected nearly 2 decades worth of empirical data about health and exercise behaviors. But no step goal, exercise target, or fitness challenge has ever compelled me towards behavior change like the story I read about myself, written by myself in 2023. It's very hard to argue with your past self who is giving you evidence-based advice rooted in your own experience. And that's just one example. When I wrote the journal, it was just me recording my internal landscape. But when I evaluated it, it became an answer key, or at least a roadmap of where to go next. It very clearly spelled out the things I was struggling with, what helped, what didn't, what I wanted to focus on, what I forgot I was focusing on and came back 2 months later. The proof was in the pudding. Using the tool with the express goal to help me work through my thoughts was very helpful in the moment, but it was the evaluation part of the process that made this endeavor pay out tenfold. Journaling is no longer a habit I'm trying to keep up. It's part of the infrastructure of my life. I think examining and evaluating will give back way more than you put in. And this process can be applied to any area of your life. This isn't to say every entry or scribble or sketch yields a profound insight. The reread and review in December can be a bit repetitive and embarrassing, but it's exactly this cumulative information that highlights the patterns and gives the insights. Here's an excerpt from my 2025 journal that I think is a good example of why it's not only important to evaluate what you collect, but how you collect it. June 29th. I've had low-level agitation the past couple days. I'm not even sure I want to investigate why. I don't want to be ignorant, but I'm almost sick of my own incessant need to self-investigate. The introspection is feeling like paralysis. Maybe it's why I've not been drawn to journaling. I guess that's the impetus for establishing some journal prompts for taking action. This is such a short entry, but it illustrates the value of capturing your thoughts, even if you think they don't matter that much. In this case, I didn't even feel like journaling, and I hadn't in a couple days. But I decided to because past experience had shown explicitly how valuable it was. I quickly identify the technique I'm using isn't supporting me anymore. And then almost immediately pivot to brainstorming how it could. If I decided not to journal that day, I probably wouldn't have got this really helpful insight about my approach. Sometimes it's not the tool that isn't supporting you, but the technique or approach of using it. This also illustrates how staying flexible with how we use a tool can extend the longevity and effectiveness of its use. If I go into journaling with the belief that journals are just a tool for processing difficult emotions or recounting the specific events of the day, then I won't see the possibility that it could also be a tool to motivate myself, or a tool to brainstorm ideas, or a tool to help me do whatever. This goes for any tool. If I think a sketchbook should look a certain way, be a nice collection of my work that I can confidently share with others, then I miss the opportunity to consider that it could be a sandbox for making mistakes or trying out stuff that might ultimately better my craft. Today, I use a bunch of different capture tools to support what I want to do, and that mix shifts depending on my needs and objectives. My mix is unique, and I only use tools that support the weird shit that I want to get up to. I do use digital note-taking tools and calendars to keep track of tasks and to-dos and notes that I don't know where else to put. I use digital drawing software to fool around on my tablet. And I use a sketchbook to work out visual things I'm toying with. And I take lots of notes in the margins because a sketchbook can be whatever you want it to be. It's not just for visual media. Call it whatever you want. Visual journal, commonplace book, everything book. The name is kind of irrelevant, so just call it something you won't get aesthetically offended by. As far as my self-discovery goes, well, it's an ongoing process. But if I had to tell my younger self anything, I would pinch her cheeks, and you can pinch your own cheeks to remind you that you're here in the physical world. And I would say, listen here, Missy. You've got a lot of weird and funny and sometimes bizarre ideas and opinions and thoughts and feelings in that little noggin, and you should get them out here and look at them. Maybe you can't make sense of them immediately, but stay curious and just keep collecting, because you might make sense of them tomorrow or next month. And if you keep gathering, a year from now, you'll have a year worth of you, and you'll very quickly start to see patterns emerge, through lines of interest, curiosity loops that will point you towards your next right avenue of inquiry. And all of it will appreciate over time. 3 years from now or 23 years from now, you'll be so glad to have evidence of who you were back then and how essential it's been in shaping who you are today. Trust me, your future self will thank you. So start imperfectly or restart for the 100th time. Start small, start cheap, start with whatever you have on hand. Grab one of those abandoned journals and fill it up. Start examining, start noticing. Don't know what to fill them with? Whatever you think is interesting, whatever's on your mind. Have access to a printer? Use that thing. Print some stuff out. Chop it up. It'll feel real good to touch paper. Leave the evaluation until you've gathered enough stuff to evaluate. This is your journey of self-discovery. And if you keep gathering ideas and insights, you're bound to discover something about yourself. I'm going to file this lesson in my creative first aid kit as Lesson 2. The High Priestess, a champion of self-knowledge who reminds us that a lot of what we're seeking is already inside us. We just gotta squeeze it out. This video is number 3 in a 22-part series called Median Arcana, Practical Tools for the Impractical Pursuit of Creativity. Subscribe to follow the journey. As always, thanks for watching. Yours truly, Zoe Popsicle.